American Family News, I'm Chris Woodward. The Pentagon is revealing that Russian hackers breached an unclassified defense computer network earlier this year. Sagar Magani reports.
Speaking at Stanford University on a swing through Silicon Valley focusing on cybersecurity, Defense Secretary Ash Carter said the military quickly uncovered the breach.
We analyzed their network activity associated with Russia and then quickly kicked them off the network.
Carter says the incident shows the Pentagon is moving in the right direction, but he still worries about what it does not know.
Because this was only one attack that we found.
Sagar Meghani at the Pentagon.
Elaine Weinstein says the Pakistani government should have done more to win the release of her husband as he was held hostage by al-Qaeda. U.S. officials say Weinstein was killed by a CIA drone strike in Pakistan in January. President Obama says the strike targeted an al-Qaeda compound and that there had been no evidence that Weinstein or an Italian hostage were there. The Italian man was also killed. Officials say drone strikes also killed 2 Americans who had been working with al-Qaeda. A pro-life leader is amazed at President Obama's thoughts on babies.
Media Research Center captured it as President Obama recently made a speech on women experiencing too many difficulties on the job because they are women, including being paid differently than men and for the same job.
Or being reprimanded or fired for taking too many bathroom breaks when you're pregnant. Clearly, that's a man making that decision because they don't have 5 pounds of kicks pressing down on their bladder. Women can't even depend, by law, on getting a paid day off to give birth.
Eric Scheidler of the Pro-Life Action League is encouraged to see him making this kind of admission.
But at the same time, it's rather outrageous that he remains such an advocate for abortion even up to the day of birth. Here we have him recognizing that babies kick their mothers inside, and yet we're allowed to have that same baby the next day taken to an abortionist and literally torn limb from limb, and that's acceptable under our laws.
Scheidler also points out that while Obama apparently recognizes that a baby in a mother's womb is a living human being, while an Illinois senator, he repeatedly voted against a bill requiring abortion clinics to try and save the lives of babies born alive during abortions. I'm Charlie Butts.
An Ohio pro-family activist says he believes that Ohio Governor John Kasich is going to enter the 2016 presidential race. AFN's Chad Gerning reports.
On Sunday, Kasich said he was getting, quote, more and more serious about jumping into the Republican race. Kasich recently visited New Hampshire and South Carolina and says he's got a heavy schedule ahead. Then on Monday, the Ohio governor announced the creation of New Day for America, a committee that will let him raise money to promote a potential campaign. Phil Burris is chairman of Ohio-based Citizens for Community Values Political Action Committee. He thinks Kasich is going to enter the race.
It sure looks like it. Governor Kasich, we've known him for quite a long period of time here in Ohio, and we've sure had our ups and downs with him. Definitely over him accepting the Medicaid money was a big issue with us, and he really offended a lot of the grassroots activists, the value voters.
But Burris says Kasich has done a lot of good for Ohio.
Financially, the guy has done an incredible job with the state of Ohio, turning it around from the near brink of bankruptcy to a surplus. So the business community, I think, will definitely get behind him. And on the social issues, he's been right on marriage. He hasn't been a strong voice, but when he's pushed into the corner, he will say marriage is one man and one woman.
And Burris believes Kasich's foreign policy experience while a member of Congress will be a positive aspect of his presidential resume. I'm Chad Groening.
Earlier this week, Hot Air quoted Kasich as saying he plans on going to a same-sex wedding soon, even though Kasich says he is opposed to same-sex marriage. In final news this hour, sales of new homes plummeted in March as the spring buying season opened with sharp declines in the Northeast and South. The NASDAQ closed at a record high for the first time since the dot-com bubble of 2000. And Pete Rose got the green light from Baseball Commissioner Rob Manfred to participate in activities surrounding this summer's All-Star Game in his hometown of Cincinnati.
100 days, 100 subscribers at $7 will bring FirstAmendmentRadio.com to the minimum level necessary to sustain it through 2015. Go to support.FirstAmendmentRadio.com. $7 a month. Really, you can afford that for our Protestant First Amendment rights and the gospel of the kingdom message. Where your heart is, there will your treasure be also. Go to support.FirstAmendmentRadio.com.
You're listening to FirstAmendmentRadio.com worldwide. Freedom is never free. We need your support today at FirstAmendmentRadio.com.
Okay, welcome back to the Investigative Journal on this September 23rd, 2014 day in our calendar. You're listening to FirstAmendmentRadio.com. I'm your host, Greg Anthony, and I'm here every day, 6 p.m. to 7 p.m., that's Pacific time. Today I can't help but talk about ISIS. There's so much of that name in the news now, and it's very disalarming to me that people really don't understand what this means and why they are using this name. Now, I did a show a couple weeks back, but it seemed to fall on deaf ears. I got a couple of emails, one positive stating, yes, you're right on the money, the other stating, you don't know what you're talking about. How can you blame the Vatican when the terrorist leader of the ISIS group wants to kill the Pope? And so maybe I'll answer some of these questions today and give you a little bit background on why they're using the name ISIS and who is really behind them. I asked about 10 or 15 people during the week because it comes up all the time. And the question, of course, I asked was, you've heard of ISIS. I said, do you know what ISIS is? And they said, yes, it's a terrorist group out of a very radical Muslim terrorist group. I said, yeah. And I said, do you know why they use that name? And they said, no. And I said, do you know who ISIS is in history? And they said, no. And I said, do you know who really funds ISIS? And they said, well, it must be people that hate America. And I said, well, do you know who those people are? And they said, well, not by name. And so the questions go on. But the real important thing here is that terrorism, the war on terror, everything's a war with the people in charge. But the war on terror officially, I guess, began after 9/11. And it has escalated to, and 13 years later, now we're faced with this extremist Muslim group that is actually fighting its own people there, reminds me of the Civil War in America, right? And actually threatening everybody on the planet that lives in the West, including Christians, including the Pope, etc. And in the news, okay, let's move forward. Now, U.S. and France are bombing Syria and a supposed location of where this terrorist group is at. The Vatican has called for military action. Interesting. And the various media outlets reported just last weekend that the latest target is this Pope Francis. And then Vatican officials this was back on August 29th, they said, the threat wasn't serious. And then, of course, it escalated to 2 days ago, where now it is becoming more real. So the point is, let's try to decipher all of this stuff. Because my point is that the name ISIS has a serious meaning, and the meaning leads you to who actually is controlling or started this operation and why they're doing it. And it may sound strange to some, to many, but not to a few, that the real culprits behind this group are the Vatican itself and the Jesuit order, as well as their minions in America, London, etc. And the reason is they believe that they must create an enemy, create a conflict to forward their agenda, which isn't to see America prosper in the future. So let's try to decipher this and start out by seeing who ISIS is. Let's just start out with a history of her. And then, of course, make a connection to the people I just mentioned. Now, the history of Isis and Osiris, the Egyptian god and goddess, is known throughout Egypt and has become one of the most popular and fabled folklore tales in Egyptian mythology. Isis was believed to be the daughter of Nut and Geb. The Egyptian goddess Isis later married Osiris, another ancient Egyptian deity, and who was also her brother. Okay, so she married her brother. Osiris seems to have been in continual feud with another Egyptian god at the time, Seth. And in many versions of the tale, Osiris and Seth are brothers, and Isis and Seth's wife, Nefertiti's, are their sisters, as well as their wives. Eventually, so we have a lot of interesting things going on here. Eventually, Seth killed Osiris by drowning him in the Nile. Isis, the goddess of magic, used her powers to bring her husband back to life, only to have him once again struck down by Seth. Now, apparently determined to accomplish her deed in a way that even Isis would be unable to undo, Seth mutilated Osiris into multiple parts, and many say there were 14 parts, and hid them throughout the desert. So let's picture this scene. He dismembers Osiris, who is her husband and brother, and hides the parts and dismembers them and hides, and there were supposedly 14 parts throughout the desert. Now, Isis would not have bested by Seth, and in somewhat romantic tale, proceeded to spend many years searching for her husband's various body parts. I guess she wanted to put them back together again. The Egyptian goddess Isis finally managed to find almost all of them, and once again used her magical powers to bring about his rebirth. At this point, it appears she became pregnant, although the manner by which she became impregnated seems to be a subject of much debate. Some traditions state that Isis hid Osiris until he was able to impregnate her, and that Osiris eventually succumbed to death from the wounds inflicted by Seth. Other tales instead contend that Isis actually impregnated herself with her husband's body. Okay. Now, whatever the method, the Egyptian goddess Isis gave birth to a son, Horus, who would achieve significant fame throughout Egypt. In later years, it was recounted that Horus sought to avenge his father's murder and proceeded to kill Seth. The myths of Isis and Osiris caution us about the need for occasional renewal and reconnection in our relationships. Now, that statement I'm reading comes from, obviously, people who worship this still, not me. And I just wanted you to understand a little bit about who she is. Now, how do I make the connection, and can you make a connection between the Vatican, London, and Washington with ISIS? Well, apparently, history tells us, or this myth tells us, that his body parts, all of his body parts were recovered, 13 of them, and except his penis, which she couldn't find. Now, what she did was she erected an obelisk, a statue which looks like the monument in Rome, the one in London, and the one in the Vatican. And she set up a day to worship this. Now, the point being is that if this is the case, I mean, this is an Egyptian goddess many people have said the Vatican and many of our leaders who follow their orders worship these pagan goddesses and gods. Now, Isis' themes are magic, harvest, dreams, divination. She was one of the key figures, and the worship of these gods could not go without including her. Now, the Egyptians venerated Isis as the queen of sorcery, the mother moon, etc. Isis taught humankind the basic skills necessary to build civilizations, they believe. She came to represent powerful attributes that they followed. Now, whatever the case, we have to remember that this Egyptian goddess erected this obelisk to commemorate her brother and husband, and it is basically a phallic symbol. Now, knowing these great minds that exist at the top of this so-called Illuminati New World Order, and knowing they adhere to many occult symbols and signs and tell us things through these, if these organizations actually were Christian, because that's what the Vatican contends it is, and that's what our leaders tell us they are, why would they even consider allowing an obelisk to be in the central points of, what this country and what the Vatican stands for and what England stands for? For example, when you walk through St. Peter's Square, that's right there in the middle, the obelisk. And I've walked by it hundreds of times in the 7 years that I lived there, many of those times not understanding what it was. And I'm convinced that many, many people, 99% of the people that go there, don't understand it either. But there's some interesting things about that obelisk, which I'll get into later. But is it just me? But why? Now, let's say that our leaders come up with a story that, this really isn't what it is. What is it then? It's a gift. It's a remembrance of the past. Well, listen, or it was maybe the way the people in the past thought about it, but we're different now. Well, if they are different, why don't you tear the things down and put up something that really represents Christianity or freedom or liberty or the Constitution of the United States? But it is my contention that they use these symbols as an esoteric, occult mean for them to understand that we have been hoodwinked. The people are actually worshiping one thing and when they are worshiping another, and the Vatican and our government talks out of both sides of its mouth. Now, how can I tell you that? Well, because if you look at these stories regarding the Vatican and ISIS now, here's where they talk out of both sides of their mouth. The Pope says that there needs to be military action against this group. Now, privately, they created this group through their minions and through their plan to increase the war on terror, to increase the conflict strategy, so that they, in the end, can, let's just look at America, their prize. This is really what they've wanted from the beginning, since this country was formed. What they want is to reduce us to a country that worships what they worship. Now, whether we do it knowingly or unknowingly is not important to them. The main thing is that's what they want. And they can get this through conflict strategy by creating this organization, by then having a counter-organization, our military, the French military, fighting them, creating conflict, creating more terrorist attacks here, creating laws that are going to restrict our freedoms, etc., and so forth. Now, if our leaders were true and understood this, they would not communicate, or they would tell us the truth. But they don't, because they are involved in this conspiracy as well. And let's talk about that. What have we seen from our government officials since this new terrorist group? It's on the lips of everybody I talk to. I mean, ISIS, this. Every time you turn on CNN, I don't care what time you turn it on, that word is going to be heard. And you're going to hear about all of these things. One, the beheadings and etc. and so forth. Let's see how much time we got in this half hour. Well, we're rolling along. Got about 9 minutes, so I just didn't want to run over in the first half hour. So what I'm saying is that's all you hear. And we hear, things coming out of this. If we have the greatest military in the world, this stuff shouldn't exist. And unless it was created by us, where do they get their money? Where do they get their funds? Now, if you adhere to the same feeling, the same idea I have, I believe that all these leaders at the top, no matter what side they're on, and whether they really know what they're doing or not, are all working together to advance what is going on. So, does it make sense to you when you understand who ISIS is, when you understand these people in the Vatican and these people that control our governments worship these pagan gods and goddesses? And that is made known through Freemasonry, and you can read Manly Hall, you can read all these people, and they'll tell you exactly what they're doing. But people do not listen, do not read, do not know who this is. And 9 out of 10, 99 out of 100 people will not know what ISIS is. And basically they will say, well, it stands for Islamic, they can make up something. But why would a government call it ISIS? Or they could think of a Muslim name for it, couldn't they? Why would they use ISIS? And I believe it's because the people at the top are really telling us who they are. But many people will never know. So, the question looms. What can we do? Well, the first thing you can do is understand it and try to connect these dots. And then ask yourself, does it make sense to you? Am I off base here? Is Greg really off base with bringing this information to us? Should it be considered? Well, I believe it should be. And look at what our officials have said since this terrorist group is made known. I mean, 3 months ago, nobody heard of this group. All of a sudden, it just pops up. And it pops up big. And that, to me, is another sign that something's rotten in Denmark. But look at this. So we hear the name ISIS, then we hear of all the terror, we hear all the frightening things coming out of the leaders' mouths. We see these black masked people threatening to kill every Christian they encounter, threatening to bomb, to destroy America, etc., etc. What have our leaders really done? First, the president, when this first hit, he was playing golf. And he's been kind of tiptoeing around this issue, playing, the nice guy, while his underling, Joe Biden, plays the bad cop. And he's made a statement. Well, finally, Obama had to agree to escalate this, and they're bombing now, along with France, in Syria. But Biden, along the way, he was playing the bad guy, and he was rousing the troops, rousing the American. We will not stand for these people. We will, in his exact words, we will follow ISIS to the gates of hell. And that, to me, was a very telling sentence that he said, because it told me who they worship and what they really want to do. And there is no way. Why would we follow them to the gates of hell? Maybe that's what they worship. And I'm telling you, I believe what he was telling his fellow friends was that this will be another, nail in the coffin of America, and we will make sure. And the American military now is up in arms. We're going to see some things happen here very interesting in the future. But what can we do? Well, you can understand it. You can start really understanding who these people are. And I believe if everybody knew, they wouldn't have as much power over us as they do. I'm not saying we might be able to defeat them. I mean, how can, I'm sitting here going, we can't defeat them through any type of revolution, which isn't the proper thing to do, and I would never incite that like many people on the internet do. And we can't do it by running away. There's nowhere to go. I mean, many Americans are fed up, leave. Now, I'm not saying there aren't better places to live in the world, but if your reason for leaving is just because you want to get away from these people here, you won't find that to be the case anywhere you go. If you want to live somewhere else for economic reasons, for artistic reasons, for, hey, I just like the food in Taiwan, then fine. Or if you like the lifestyle there, fine. But don't leave just because you're running away from something. You may find out it's worse. The grass isn't greener on the other side, so to speak. It's my contention that there's really nowhere to go if you're just trying to avoid these people, because they're all over. My point is, so what do you do? Well, I think what we're going to do, I'm going to give you an interesting insight into another way of showing the connection between that obelisk in Rome and the occult, and I come back in the second half hour. And I also want to get into a little bit about this so-called Freedom Statue of Liberty in the New York Harbor and what that may really mean. And the reason I want to do that is because, there's so many of these symbols these people have used. And I've talked about the Statue of Liberty years ago, and want to just refresh my memory a little bit about it, as well as yours, because as we know, there's so many of these signs and symbols in Washington and all over that we've discussed that sometimes we overlook this one. And I want to get back to that also in the last part of the second half hour. But anyway, think about that. What's really interesting is, let's see, a Vatican insider in La Stampa, this was in July 21st, there was a Muslim who gave up his life for Mosul's Christians, and he was killed by ISIS militants in Mosul yesterday, and this was in July. Chaldean website ankawa.com reported this, and this was on a website out of a newspaper out of La Stampa, and this was July 21, and I don't know when ISIS hit the news here, or the exact date, I forget, but that was interesting. Things were going on there that probably we didn't hear about even before it hit the newsstands here. Here's one, 6 days ago. Pope Francis may face ISIS threat on Albania trip. Would they kill him to meet their own purposes? Why not? They could always put another guy in. The ends justifies the means. And I guess most people would say, well, if they threaten the Pope, how can they be involved? How can they be the head of that? Oh, boy. That's interesting, because they will sacrifice their own. I don't really think they will do that in this case, but who knows what they have planned. So anyway, listen, you're listening to the Investigative Journal. I'll be back for another segment right after these short messages, and I wanted to remind you that you can get a lot of these articles on arcticbeacon.com. You can also help me out if you'd like, and donate some money there, if you will, on my PayPal account. Keep this show going. Back in 3 minutes.
Hear it first on FirstAmendmentRadio.com and FirstAmendmentRadio.net.
Have you read the last prophecy? The book of Revelation. Who can understand it. We believe that God wrote His Word to us for our understanding and salvation, on which so many diverse Christians believe in the same fundamental principles. But not so the prophecy of Daniel and Revelation. Has God, by His Holy Spirit, given a sure interpretation to these mysterious passages through the centuries? Yes, He has. The only difference to the individual is on which side of each prophecy he stands in time, before or after, past or future. The last prophecy is as much a book of history, fulfilling prophecy, exposed in such a way as to leave you without a doubt. Because we are living near the end of this era, we should be able to understand the substantial amount of the revelation which has already come to pass. Get the book, The Last Prophecy, which is an abridgment of E.B. Elliott's Jorge Apocalypticae, the most comprehensive work ever done on the Revelation, condensed down to a mere 258 pages. You will come away with numerous, incontrovertible revelations into the book of Revelation to easily dispel all of the futurist confusion which has become so popular over the last century. Visit the shopping page at FirstAmendmentRadio.com to get your copy. Get 20% off when you buy it at the FirstAmendmentRadio.com shop.
Gold and silver is tremendously undervalued. Global demand vastly exceeds mine supply by more than 60% annually. There is little in the financial world more certain than a coming explosion in the prices of gold and silver. The U.S. dollar continues to lose value and respect as the world's reserve currency. Our nation faces challenges on many fronts, and a day doesn't pass without another economist bringing forth warnings of impending economic calamity. There has never been a better time than right now to acquire physical gold and silver. Discount Gold and Silver Trading was founded on the principles of truth and honesty. We believe in providing a quality product, quality service, and most importantly, competitive pricing. We provide all forms of precious metals, including American gold, silver, platinum, and rare investment and circulated coins. Silver bars, rounds, and 90% silver bags are on hand for the silver investor. Gold self-directed IRAs are available. Call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188. Toll free, that's 1-800-375-4188.
Okay, we're back on the Investigative Journal for the second half hour on this September 23rd, 2014 day in our calendar. All right, and we're connecting the dots between ISIS, the Vatican, the United States government, etc. And I think if you listen to the first half hour, you'll get my gist. But I have more stuff. I have a lot more stuff I want to give you, and I'm going to refer you to this website, which has some interesting stuff, which points the finger at the Vatican as worshiping ISIS. And it's called viewzone.com. And I'm referring to this because I'm not smart enough to do all this stuff. There's so many different gods and goddesses and intersection points and things. I just bring this to you and look around for it. And this one just popped up. And this has to do with research these guys did. And their first, Scott Onstadt says this: the modern extension of this axis, this temple of Debod, D-E-B-O-D, which is another temple dedicated to ISIS, completed in 1972 to the ancient Egyptian temple of Debod, exposes who the Vatican really worships. So go to this website. You can see some pictures there and some lines drawn, which will better explain it than I can, but I'll just get you started with this to give you a little bit more information. Okay. A man called Luz, says Scott, he emailed these guys to say that they should check out the Temple of Debod. So we have somebody from Colombia who's hip to this stuff. That's good. And so Scott did and made a major discovery. It's amazing how little things happen, and in God's providence, there's a saying. What is that saying? In God's providence, little things Oh, in God's providence, sometimes very great effects are produced from very small causes. This could be one of those, which will show you beyond a reasonable doubt that the Vatican has a connection to ISIS, and since we've made connections between the American government and the Vatican and only follow suit, that so do our leaders. Now, the Temple of Dibad was originally located very close to the great religious center dedicated to the goddess Isis in Philae, Egypt. Philae, I guess. Excuse my pronunciation. Now, when the government of Egypt started building the Aswan High Dam in the late 1960s, they needed to relocate some ancient temples to save them from eventual flooding, including the Temple of Dendur, which was moved to the Met in New York City. Well, that's interesting. And the Temple of Dibad, this temple dedicated to Isis. As a sign of gratitude for help provided by Spain in saving the temples of Abu Simbel, the Egyptian state donated the Temple of Dibad to Spain in 1968. So we have the Spain leaders who helped them relocate another temple, getting this Temple of Dibad moved to Spain. Here's the rebuilt temple. There's a picture of it, of Dibad today, where it stands near the Royal Palace in Madrid. And you can see the picture of it right here. Very interesting. Go to this website. Amazing as this is, it is not the major discovery, says Scott, that he's talking about. I checked out the site of the Temple of Dibad in Google Earth. Good move. See how these guys, there's some smart people out there. It's a linear complex, so I wondered why it is oriented as it is. And if you look at this, you got to look at this. It's a linear complex. It has when it's looked from the ground, it has it looks like it looks like some type of obelisk, a bit wider, but anyway, has that kind of look. Using the ruler tool, Scott drew a line along the complex from the tip straight through it, okay, and noted its angle. Then I extended this line, and guess where it points? So you take this temple in Madrid, and you draw a line across the Mediterranean, and guess where it points? Right to Rome. It gets better. More precisely, the line points directly, so he went really in depth, to the ancient Egyptian obelisk at the center of the Vatican Square. Now, if you're wondering if this is anything new, no, you can find that they draw these, they call them ley lines, and these symbols not only are done, for example, if you go to the Washington Monument or you look at some of the occult symbols in our city, they also do these crazy things, and they put temples and things like this in direct lines called ley lines. And we went over this in a show once when we looked at how the occult mapped out all the concentration camps in Poland during World War II, and how if you drew ley lines, they intersected places like Rome and Washington. It was incredible. So this is another way that they somehow feel empowers them. So if you draw this direct line, said Scott, which he did, it goes directly to the obelisk at the center of Vatican Square. The line, which is actually a great circle whose center is the center of the earth, coincides with the central axis of St. Peter's Basilica and Vatican Square. So he drew it, and if you go to St. Peter's Square, it goes right through that obelisk. Now that can't be a coincidence. Right down the line. And if you'll indulge yourself, go to this website and look at this. Now, as my friend, says Scott, and fellow researcher Court Lindahl discovered, the access of the Vatican this line actually goes directly to the Hagia Sophia. That's another cult temple, I imagine, in Istanbul. So putting these discoveries together, Scott says, we now have one continuous alignment connecting the Temple of Dibad with the Hagia Sophia in Byzantine Constantinople, Istanbul, running directly along the Vatican axis that bisects St. Peter's Square. Yes, strange things occur right before your very eyes. Now, they ask, what could this mean? Now, I'm looking at the line here. It's interesting. Goes from Madrid, and we all know the connections between Spain and the Vatican still. Rome, right through the Vatican Square, right across to Constantinople, and that temple, Hagia Sophia. So what does this mean? What could this mean? Then Scott says the Vatican Hagia Sophia connection makes a lot of sense because Constantinople became the eastern headquarters of the Roman Empire after Rome was sacked by the Visigoths in the time of Constantine the Great. This alignment shows that that geomancy was practiced in ancient times. This was practiced then. The modern extension of this access, completed in 72 to the ancient Temple of Dibad, exposes who the Vatican really worships. Now, he's quick to point out that, and, I know why he does this, because I get accused of this all the time. I'm Catholic bashing. No, I'm not. He says, I'm not saying, Scott says, I'm saying the people of the Catholic faith worship ISIS. And I will say this, that's true, because they don't know. They may be doing it unknowingly because their leaders are the ones directing the worship that they're doing, correct? Now, maybe the priest in your parish doesn't know, but then he's been directed by another person, and if you get to the top, they know. Now, what he's saying is, Scott says, he's showing there's an Egyptian connection that keeps popping up in relation to the Vatican, which it shouldn't if they're a Christian organization. And if we're a Christian country, we shouldn't be in bed with these people like we are today and kissing the Pope's, every leader going to Rome, kissing the Pope's ring, taking pictures under Ignatius Loyola's picture, if we really know what these people are all about. Consider the colossal bronze pinnacone in the Vatican's courtyard. I've seen that, of the Belvedere, which came from the Temple of Isis in ancient Rome. And the obelisk from the Heliopolis in St. Peter's Square has two additional examples. I've talked about the obelisk. Also, Scott shows how Pietro Perugino's, I've seen this fresco, in the Sistine Chapel uses occult Egyptian symbols. And he does this in his episode called Esoteric Astronomy. And the question should be asked, do you think these alignments are accidents? Just coincidence? The mind boggles at the odds if you really think about it. And if you take all of this stuff, bring it to today's world, you will find that name ISIS tells you who created them, who worships that group, and who is funding this terrorist organization right before your very eyes. And with that, you think about it, and go to that website, viewzone.com, and look at those ley lines. Okay. I promised that, let's see how much time we got. I never know. Well, we got about 15 minutes, plenty of time. And what I want to do is get back to the Statue of Liberty. Now, like I said, I've done this years ago, and I think it's important because it sits there in the harbor, and I always hear this when I watch. I like to watch New York Yankee baseball games, and I always, either during the game, they pan out into the harbor, and one of the announcers will say, and there's Lady Liberty protecting our shores, blah, blah, blah. Well, what really is she? I mean, she's kind of a weird-looking figure when you look at it, when you really get close to it. And it's in the East Bay there. I remember I took a little trip out there when I lived in New York, and weird-looking creature. Doesn't seem to be that, I would think if I wanted to have a symbol, of freedom and liberty, it wouldn't be that. But then again, I'm not in the occult, and this goes way back. So, I mean, this is a story that goes way back, and the people today are just falling in line with their elite brothers and sisters, keeping this great tradition moving forward. So let's look at this. Mr. Bill Dankenbring brings us a lot of this information today. Thank him. And what is the history and origin of the famed Statue of Liberty? Does really anybody know? Well, most people say, well, I think it was a gift from France. Is it so innocent as millions assume? There's much more to this story than most would think about. And probably, even after I tell you, you won't believe it. And I don't want you to. I just want you to look into it. It is time we pulled aside the cloak, says Mr. Dankenbring, and took a good look at some facts and what they really mean for us today. Yeah. You might be shocked to know that the deception that has been pulled over the eyes of American people is as large as that statue in the New York harbor. Now, he says it's very interesting that the great symbol that is situated in the harbor of New York City is a woman carrying a torch. As we saw in a previous issue that he did called Prophecy Flash, New York City represents the city of modern Babylon the Great. Interesting. Just like its predecessor of olden days, modern New York is the financial hub and the capital of the world. It is the center of American and multinational finance, marketing, and location of the headquarters of the United Nations. That's an interesting figure. Located at the end time of Babylon, and he cites the Bible here, we find that is associated with a woman. In fact, she is called a woman, and the prophet Isaiah speaks of her as the daughter of Babylon. In Revelation, we read, and let's read it, I saw a woman sit upon a scarlet-colored beast, full of names of blasphemy, having 7 heads and 10 horns. And upon her forehead was a name written, Mystery Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and the abominations of the earth. Now, he gets into a few other things, and I won't belabor those things right now in regarding the Statue of Liberty, regarding what's in Revelations, and even in Isaiah, he says it's referred to as the daughter of Babylon. Now, New York City, he says, has been a merchant capital from its inception, from the time it was first settled by the Dutch traders and called New Amsterdam. From the time it was first settled, it was a place of rampant enterprise and merchandising and grew to symbolize the entrepreneurial spirit of this country. Correct. Yeah. Now, the world is the ignorant of the occult symbolism which lies behind this famed Statue of Liberty, which sits astride the harbor of New York, symbolizing the true inner character and purpose. The sculptor who made the great statue was Italian. His name was Auguste Betholdi. His work was greatly influenced by the ancient sculptor Phidias, who made gigantic statues of ancient goddesses, particularly Athena, the goddess of wisdom, and Nemesis, another name for Venus, a goddess who held up a cup in her right hand. Before beginning the Statue of Liberty project, Betholdi was seeking a commission to construct a giant statue of the goddess Isis. Here we go. Another connection, the Egyptian Queen of Heaven, to overlook the Suez Canal. The statue of Isis was to be robed woman holding aloft a torch. Now, wow, maybe we got a connection between Isis here and the Statue of Liberty, maybe, huh? Statue of Liberty, first, this woman, robed woman, that's the way it is in the harbor, right? Statue of Liberty, first 100 years, Bernard Weisberger, page 30, quoted in Beyond Babylon, James Lloyd, page 103. Now let's see the Masonic and the Vatican connection. Betholdi never did make the statue of Isis for the Suez Canal, but it seems obvious that he made it after all, fulfilling his life's ambitions when he constructed the Statue of Liberty for the United States. So, it seems to me that Isis is sitting in the New York harbor, perhaps, already. Now, why don't you ask some of your intelligent leaders of your country to give you some double talk on this. And they will look at you like, you're crazy. Well, anyway, writes James Lloyd in Beyond Babylon, Auguste Betholdi was a member of a cult Masonic lodge in Paris, a secret international brotherhood linked to the ancient builders of the pyramids and the cathedrals. Quoted from the Statue of Liberty by Weisberger, as a result, fellow members of the mysterious order of Masons, and we know the connection between the Vatican and the Jesuits and the Masons, were frequently involved with the creation of structure and the various ceremonies that were dedicated to it. For example, the pedestal was built by another Mason named Richard Hunt, and the design came from his study of pyramids. Now, you recall the Tower of Babel was, and of course the Statue of Liberty is actually a tower. Now, why in the hell would any country that's not talking out of both sides of its mouth use a symbol like that? I mean, they would say, forget it. We don't want any connection with that, and that Statue of Liberty would not have looked the way it is today. But nobody cares. Everybody doesn't. People, they travel. It's a tourist. I mean, give me a break. As the obelisk was completed in the 1880s, a number of American clergymen were upset that a pagan goddess was being placed on American soil. Oh, back then they were upset? Yeah. Now they're on anybody because they've systematically gotten rid of any dissent. They don't want you to know the truth. So we got people back in the 1880s who were saying, we don't want a pagan goddess representing on our soil. The Masonic Lodge, in the meantime, kept a low profile to avoid unnecessary controversy, just as they did when they planned the Washington Monument, another Egyptian obelisk symbolizing the rays of the Egyptian god shining down and enlightening mankind. The Masons, of course, traced the origins of their secret society back to King Solomon and back to ancient Egypt, says Alexander Hislop in his magnificent book, The Two Babylons, concerning the origins of Freemasonry. And I've already showed you the connections go back even farther than that, according to other Masonic writers, going back to the Enoch in the Bible. Not the good Enoch, but the bad Enoch from Cain. And they say, no, it was the good one, but we've gone over that story. So we've seen that. We're seeing this connection that perhaps that is a representation of ISIS as well. As Hislop shows, well, here we go. The Masons, it is admitted that their secret system of Freemasonry was originally founded on the mysteries of the Egyptian Isis, the goddess mother of wife of Osiris. But what could have led to the union of the Masonic body with these mysteries? Had they not a particular reference to architecture, and had the god who was worshipped in them not been celebrated for his success in perfecting the arts of fortification and building? Now, if such were the case, considering the relation in which, as we have already seen, Egypt stood to Babylon, who would naturally be looked up to be their great as the patron of the Masonic art? The strong presumption is that Nimrod, the arch-rebel ancient Elohim, must have been the man. He was the first that gained fame in this way. As the child of Babylonian goddess mother, he was worshipped, as we have seen, in the character of Alamahozim, the god of fornications. Osiris is like manner. The child of the Egyptian Madonna was equally celebrated as the strong chief of buildings. This strong chief of buildings was originally worshipped in Egypt with the physical characteristics of Nimrod. As Hislop shows, Isis is the Egyptian name for the Babylonian goddess Ishtar, who is also the same as Athena, Minerva, Astarte, Cybele, Ashtoreth, and Diana. The statue of pagan Madonna, the Statue of Liberty, is a statue of this same ancient pagan queen of heaven, the wife of Nimrod, or Semiramis. Oh, these words are hard to pronounce. So we're seeing this connection again between Isis, the Statue of Liberty, and it's just amazing that no one gets it. But why should we? We don't get any. I mean, we're not taught in our culture to look back into history, unless it's history they've written, revisionist history. That's what they want you to do. And like I said many times, I want all my money back from every every school I went to that was teaching the history they gave me, because it led me on a very bad path. Kept me away from what really may be happening. Now, we get into a whole big discussion here of the connections between the Statue of Liberty and ISIS and other goddesses from Greece. Consider for the moment, though, that the Statue of Liberty, says Mr. Denkenberg, is one of the largest statues ever made. Its proper name is Liberty Enlightening the World. The statue represents a proud woman standing on a huge pedestal with her right arm extended, holding high a flaming torch. A turreted crown with huge spikes symbolizing the rays of the sun rests on her head. At her feet is broken shackles symbolizing the overthrow of tyranny. The statue stands 151 feet in height, weighs about 100 tons, and stands on a Babylonian-style tower, which is 150 feet high. Okay? That's what it is. Let's see. And we're just about out of time, so I'm glad I checked, because I would have gone on for a while, and I got a lot more to talk about. Maybe we'll touch on this, but hey, do your homework. There's a lot you can find out about the Statue of Liberty and what she really means, but I think I gave you some good points to begin. Hey, thanks for coming by today on the Investigative Journal. I'll be here tomorrow, same time, same place, on FirstAmendmentRadio.com, and I'm here 6 p.m. to 7 p.m. Good night.
Since the beginning of time, kings have sought it, nations have fought for it. It has been traded, it has been borrowed, it has been purchased, it has been stolen. There's a reason for it. To secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and to our posterity. Invest with the security of gold and silver. Call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188 or visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net. Listen to Financial Survival with your host, Melody Cedarstrom, right here on FirstAmendmentRadio.com at 4 p.m. Eastern or 1 p.m. Pacific Time. Visit DiscountGoldandSilverTrading.net or call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188. Toll free, 1-800-375-4188.
American Family News, I'm Chris Woodward. Loretta Lynch has been confirmed as the nation's 83rd Attorney General. Jerry Bodlander reports.
After waiting more than 5 months, Loretta Lynch was confirmed as Attorney